Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name's Jeannie Rosner. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to Soul Food Salon. Our hope and our mission is to educate and inspire us all to be healthier. So hopefully we will do that today with our lovely discussion. So a little bit about me. Um, I'm a retired anesthesiologist. I started Soul Food Salon a little over 7 years ago. We hold monthly health and wellness events featuring different experts. Historically, they were in person. This past year, we've been doing them virtually. Everything that we have done in the last 7+ years is on our website, which is soulfoodsalon.com. Go there. All of our past events are there. Anything that we've written is up there. We have a health and wellness newsletter called Soulful Insights, and that is up there as well. So you could spend a good deal of time playing around on our website and learning a lot, hopefully. As I mentioned, past events are there. So we have recorded many events. We are recording today's event through Zoom. It will be up on our YouTube channel, which is soulfoodsalon.com. And that will hopefully happen within the next 24 hours. I will send out an email to those who are on my email list. If you're not getting our emails, you can reach out to me, Jeannie, Jeanne, at soulfoodsalon.com, and I happily add you to our list. You can also go to the website, soulfoodsalon.com, and at the top, there's a little link to sign up to receive the Soulful Insights. Okay, so I'm pretty active on social media, predominantly Instagram, but Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube is all at Soul Food Salon, all one word. So follow along. Hopefully you'll be inspired and empowered to maybe cook a new recipe or try a new meditation technique. I offer a plethora of things for you to learn from. So every year we partner with a different nonprofit, and this year we are partnered with a nonprofit called Off Their Plate, which was started a little over a year ago at this point by a third-year medical student at Harvard Medical Center. And it was right as COVID was starting and the hospital cafeterias were closed and the restaurants were closing. And so what she did was she partnered and married the two together and kept the restaurants employed and the hospital workers fed through this partnership. And so essentially, a $100 donation made to Off Their Plate will provide 10 meals. Initially, it was to healthcare workers, but now it's to the at-need community. And it provides also 3 work hours for the restaurant workers. They're now present in 9 cities. They're present here in the Bay Area, and that's the effort that we are helping with. So far, we've raised over $16,000, which is fabulous. So I would love it if you guys can make a donation. And the easiest way to do that would be to go to my website, again, soulfoodsalon.com. The main page, in the middle of the first page, the About page, there's a specific link that they created for Soul Food Salon. So go there and make the donation. I would really appreciate it. So our next event is on Monday, May 10th, and it's with Dr. Emerin Meyer. He is a gastroenterologist, neuroscientist, and a distinguished research professor at UCLA Medical Center. He has a new book that's coming out, and it's also the name of our salon, which is called The Gut Immune Connection. So he's going to talk a lot about diet and how it affects immune health, how it affects our gut microbiome, and how it just generally affects our overall health. He is a wealth of knowledge. I met him at a conference maybe 5 years ago, and we've been in touch ever since. So check that out. So today our salon is on Zoom, virtual. Adar will do his presentation, and then we will have time at the end for Q&A. So let me introduce Adar today to you, Adar Cohen. So he's a mediator and a facilitator, and for the last 20 years, he's helped navigate and orchestrate really difficult conversations, whether it be in Northern Ireland, in prisons in Chicago, or in CEO businesses, and in family rooms. So he's just a wealth of knowledge. He has an unbelievably gentle way about him, which I think you guys will find so palpable and appealing. He's positive and empowering, witty, wise, insightful. We're in for a treat. So with that, I'm going to let Adar come on.
Hi, Jeannie.
Hi, Adar.
You're too kind.
I try.
It's so good to be with you. Thanks for having me at the salon.
Of course.
Yeah,
Thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here. At breakfast this morning, I told my daughter about the salon and about you and your community. And as usual, she asked me if I needed any advice. She's in kindergarten.
That's
And,
great.
and I was thinking about the fact that I won't be able to see all of the wonderful guests at the Soul Salon, and hoping that we could still find a way to have a connection to each other, even in this remote environment. And so I asked her any advice for that. And she didn't pause. She didn't even think about it. Just tell them your feelings, she said. Tell them how you really feel. Everyone wants to hear that.
I love that. Wow,
Yeah,
she's really wise too.
she is. So honestly, a lot of the time I wonder who's teaching who here.
Oh, that's great. Well, you've grown a nice daughter already who's young and learning a lot. They see, they watch you. They learn from their role models, I promise.
It's true. It's true. Well, thanks so much for having me, Jeannie.
Okay, sure. All right, so I'm going to sign off and Adar is going to take it away.
I want to start by telling you a story about a man who falls ill. He's a dad and a husband and a grandfather and a great grandfather, and everyone loves him. Everyone wants the best for him. So his whole family springs into action. But as soon as they do, as soon as they start organizing his care, his surgeries, his medications, decisions, where will he live? Remember, it's COVID. They completely implode as a decision-making team. His two daughters, they've had their misunderstandings over the years, are suddenly no longer speaking. Their spouses get involved, and arguments about his care lead to arguments about his estate. Nieces and nephews, the grandkids, they're all involved now. It's a full-blown family crisis. And meanwhile, this beloved man, all he wishes for is peace in the family. And his family is willing to give him everything to keep him comfortable, to give him the best medical care, to call in favors, to move mountains. But peace they cannot give him. Why not? He doesn't want the top doctor in the country for his condition. He told them that. He wants his family to stop fighting, and they can't give that to him. Why is that? These are the questions that keep me up at night. Literally. I'm a mediator, and that means I help people have really difficult conversations, just like this one, so they can get through some of the toughest moments of their lives. And I do this for families, and I do it for Fortune 500 companies and everyone in between. And all of us, we're all human here, so that means we all know conflict. I've come to believe that how we respond to conflict says a lot about who we are as individuals, as families, as institutions. But even more important than telling us who we are, how we show up in these difficult moments has a lot to do with who we're becoming. So in the brief time we have together today, I'd like to offer my best ideas for creating more peace in your home and in your family. And chances are that new peace in your home and the skills that created it will find ways to be helpful in other areas of your life too. We'll see. You can let me know. But first, I'd like to ask you all, wherever you are, to please pick up a pencil or a pen, or if it's just a device that you're with, hold the device for a moment. And I'd like you to write down just one single word. And the word I want you to write down is the word that best describes how you feel when you think about having the conversation you've been avoiding. The important one, the one that you think about most days of the week. What's the one word that best captures how you feel about having that conversation? So take a moment and write down that one word. Now, I'm willing to bet that words like nervous and anxious have been written down by a number of you, and also some iteration of the words angry and sad. And I would just like to say that these conversations are really hard. And you all have, all of us have, really good reasons for avoiding them. Legitimate reasons. But when we avoid conflict, and when we avoid these important conversations, that's actually creating new conflict. It's creating more complex conflict. And then we have to avoid all of that too, and find ways to work around it. And we use up vast amounts of time and energy doing that. And our relationships are affected over time. They are changed by that avoidance. So yes, these conversations are heavy, but I'm here to suggest that that's not a good reason not to have them. After all, if they're heavy, why carry them with us for weeks, months, even years? So as a mediator who's been doing this work for 20 years, I'm still able to do it because I believe deeply that conversations create the future. And for the family whose grandfather was suffering through illness, but even worse for him, suffering through the pain of seeing his family fight, I guided that family through a carefully designed, highly structured series of conversations. These were one-on-one conversations, 8-person Zooms, text threads, AirPod walks, all to help them start talking in ways that were less destructive, less exhausting, less hostile, so that they could hear each other. And they had conversations that enabled them to better understand one another and, importantly, to feel understood. The results of all of that were that they got more clarity, they set shared agreements, and some even reestablished a sense of connection they didn't think would be possible. Which means they granted their beloved grandfather his biggest wish. So how did they do it? There were no miracles, no secret sauce, no magic, just 4 strategies helped this family move forward. And that's what I'm here to share with you, those 4 strategies. So the first one, number 1, set the conversation apart. We want to schedule these big conversations in advance. So agree mutually on a time and space. You can think of it as using the scheduling process as a confidence-building challenge. Agreeing to a time creates a precedent for the group being able to figure something out together. Okay, at least we still know we can agree on something. We found a day and time. And by agreeing in advance, people can start to build a mental picture for themselves of what to expect, which allows them to decrease their anxiety, which increases how constructively people can show up. But most importantly, in setting the conversation apart, scheduling it ensures that the group can at least start the conversation from a calmer, steadier place, rather than hashing something out in the heat of the moment, because that rarely ends well. We can probably all agree. So I like to say, don't try to thread the needle in the midst of a hurricane. Set a time and reschedule if that time becomes inopportune. You're going to increase your likelihood of having a productive conversation. And people ask me a lot for my opinion on when to try to have an important conversation. Should we do it over dinner? Is it first thing in the morning? Zoom, phone call? Every situation is unique. You'll have to be the one to choose. But you can ask yourself, when was the last time you felt fully heard or nearly fully heard by the person you're trying to talk to? That venue, however you talked then, is worth considering. And if you can't get there, is there a way you can get close? And of course, the time or place where you had a really negative experience trying to talk, it's worth avoiding that space or time. And the last point here, we have a tendency to want to go all the way in once we've gone in and finish the whole thing in one go. And it's a good impulse, but close or pause the conversation before people's batteries are empty. This group especially understands, I think, the perils of low blood sugar and of getting too hungry. And these conversations are profoundly exhausting. So take a break. Come back to it when everyone's fresh. If you go for too long, you can start to undo progress that you've made. So that's rule number 1, strategy number 1, set the conversation apart. Number 2 is to ask questions. This sounds pretty simple. Let's get into some detail. When we ask a question in a conversation, we are offering our counterpart in that conversation the opportunity, a very special opportunity to be understood, to feel understood. And when people feel more understood, they immediately become more capable of listening well and of understanding. The trick in a conflict situation is that someone needs to get this started. Someone needs to be the one to interrupt the cycle of not listening and be the first to listen well. But in a high conflict situation, no one's really in the mood to go first. So here's the trick. If you can prepare a series of open-ended questions before a challenging conversation, you'll create space for your counterpart to feel heard, which enables them to do a better job of hearing you. Wherever I've worked as a mediator, if you'll trust me on this, I keep finding that it works this way. So, the questions. We all know what an open-ended question is. It's one that's hard to respond to in a single word. But a really good open-ended question feels like a really big moment to its recipient. Just being asked this kind of question feels like a breakthrough to them, even before they start to answer it. The reason for that is that it's almost impossible to stay clenched and stick to a script about your grievances when someone asks you an open-ended question about your experience. Generally speaking, as humans, we can't resist those. So, Jeannie, how did you get through, or how are you getting through the pandemic? And how have you changed as a result? I know you're not going to answer now, but I want you to answer later. But it's an example. This kind of question can really draw a person in, to draw a person out. So come to your difficult conversation ready with a bunch of really good open-ended questions. They won't be as general as the question I asked Jeannie. They'll be about the person's experience. Write them down, edit them in advance, and bring them with you. Now, as far as generating the questions, how do you know if it's a good open-ended question? You can check by asking yourself this question. Will this question that I've written down for my counterpart in this hard conversation, will this question sincerely and effectively invite that person to share their ideas, concerns, and feelings? If it won't, or if you think it might not, keep working on the question until you're pretty sure it will sincerely and effectively invite your counterpart to share their ideas, concerns, or feelings. Now, you might be thinking, but if I ask them a really good open-ended question, they're going to start talking a lot, and I'm going to need to listen to them. And you're not in the mood to do that right now, and I get that. This is one of the toughest parts, but I'm offering to you that it's worth it. It'll pay you back, I promise. Here's something to watch out for. It's really natural for our agendas to sneak in to these questions. But people can tell right away when we do that, right? Can't you tell? Working on your questions in advance means you can create ones that help your counterpart feel heard, that edit out those moments where your agenda is trying to hide in a question that's supposed to be for your counterpart. And if you can do that, they're going to start to feel heard and seen and understood, which means they'll be able to start hearing you and seeing you and understanding you, which means you will have a chance to move forward. And not having to come up with these questions on the spot is good because they're hard to come up with anyway, and so much harder when we're across from the person and we're in that heightened state. Now, some of my clients will say, Adar, you want me to have my conversation and bring a list of questions with me, but if I do that, they're going to see the list. They'll see that I wrote down these questions in advance. And I'll say something like, oh, so they'll know that you thought about it in advance. And they'll say, yes. And I want to say to all of you folks, this is not a problem. This is not the problem. Going without the list of questions into the conversation is the problem. Think about it. What a gift. You not only show up for the conversation, you not only ask your counterpart questions, you not only think about those questions in advance, but that you wrote them down for clarity and with great care. A gift. A mom and daughter I worked with recently, they were trying to come out of an extended period of disconnectedness. It was an estrangement. And the mom prepared her questions in advance with a lot of help from me. But she was self-conscious about it. She was afraid her daughter would find it inauthentic or corny or something in that department that daughters and moms deal with. But do you know what the daughter said when she saw that her mom had a list of questions with her? She said this. She said, "Ah, Mom, you wrote down your questions?" She was touched, and it worked. They were open-ended questions. The daughter found it irresistible to feel heard by her mom in this way. And so she opened up, which allowed her to become curious about her mom's experience, which meant mom could open up and be heard. And they're not estranged anymore. And mom just became a grandma and sees her grandson every weekend. The questions are a gift to your counterpart and to you. And having them at hand makes the conversation so much easier. It's calming, steadying, something you can come back to, and powerfully effective in the moment in getting out of the conflict cycle. So, number 1 is setting the conversation apart. Number 2 is asking questions. And if we ask questions, we should be ready to listen, which is strategy number 3. As a mediator, I know that if I can get people to listen to each other in a deeper way than they've been listening to each other, and for a little longer than the listener might prefer, good things start to happen. Now, to the mediators and arbitrators and other conflict resolution professionals who might see this, I'm sorry for what I'm about to do, but I have to tell the truth to Jeannie and the good people of her salon. So I'm going to tell the big secret. It's going to be out right now. Some conflicts don't have a win-win solution. There it is. A concrete solution to a complex conflict is very difficult to find. It's even harder to implement, and it's really, really hard to sustain. So I'm thinking of recently divorced parents with a history of poor communication, new partners, stressful lives, packed schedules, kids with evolving needs. Is there a perfect solution to their conflict? Probably not. But here is the secret of successful mediation, that good listening is better than the best problem solving. Good listening is better than the best problem solving. Listening well to our counterpart, even if we disagree, especially if we disagree, is the best route to resolution because their feeling heard makes them better listeners, which means we'll feel heard soon afterward. And then that becomes the cycle, rather than a cycle of not asking, not listening, and not feeling heard. So in difficult family conversations, listening without interrupting and refuting what's being said is essential. If you want to go a step further with that listening, you can ask follow-up questions. Oof, Adar, follow-up questions too. What do you want from me? More questions. This is difficult, I know. Thank you for your fortitude, your patience. Yes, more questions. And if these questions genuinely invite others to describe what they have experienced, that's hard to do, but if you can do it, to ask them to describe their emotions around that experience, their concerns about the future, your conflict with that person will be shorter lived and you'll feel lighter. More will become possible. It's worth it. You will want to litigate. I can guarantee if the conversation is a big enough one, a hard enough one, and you take any of this seriously, when you get into that conversation, you're going to want to litigate. You're going to want to correct the person. You're going to want to set the record straight. It's going to feel important to you that the truth is coming forward. But your listening is going to give you so much more than litigating can. It's a promise I want to make you, including, and this is very important, the effect of slowing things down, because conflict loves speed. So slowing down is good. Okay, so rule number 1, set the conversation apart. Rule number 2, ask questions. Rule number 3, listen. And if we've done these things and we're listening well, we can hope to encounter silence in our conversation. And that's rule number 4, is to embrace silence. Because in a heated or volatile conflict, slowing down is a very good thing. One indication that you've succeeded in slowing down your conversation is that it slows down to a point of there occasionally being some silence. So nobody panic. Silence can be okay. We have some really strong reactions to silence, particularly in tense situations. But in these challenging conversations, silence can be more valuable than the most thoughtful and well-chosen words. Oftentimes, when I'm working with a family, the breakthrough moments in a tough conversation are preceded by a brief silence. But generally speaking, we're terrified of even the briefest pause, especially in a tense conversation. We feel awkward or nervous, so we blurt something out that isn't even what we really wanted to say and might really set the conversation back. But it's worth asking, what is actually happening during a brief pause or even an extended silence? Here's an example. Two sisters disagreeing bitterly over how to care for their ailing father, the family we've already talked about. One of the daughters, in an extreme example of our aversion to silence, interpreted a 2-second pause as evidence of her sister's recalcitrance and stubbornness. The sister paused for 2 seconds. Actually, the sister who paused had barely begun to process what had been said and would have needed several more seconds to respond productively. Silence gives people the moment they need to absorb what they just heard, to orient themselves, maybe to gather themselves. And all of that enables them to ask a question or offer a thought that is significantly more useful than their instantaneous reaction, particularly in these loaded moments. So silence is an asset to these conversations, not a liability. Those are the 4 strategies for having big conversations in families and beyond our families, and for trying to have those conversations well. In my work with families facing divorce, COVID, estrangement, prenuptial grumbling, prenuptial warfare, succession planning, elder care, in all of these kinds of difficult, important conversations, I use these 4 strategies. We set a mutually agreed time and space for the conversation. Number 2, we use open-ended questions to power 3, transformative listening, deep listening. And finally, 4, we don't squander breakthrough moments by panicking about silence. We try to embrace the silence. So what happened to the family we've talked about, this family clashing as they cared for their beloved father and grandfather? They were finally able to hear his wish that they stop fighting. They asked good questions, they listened, and then they could divide responsibilities and set boundaries, and that decreased the intensity and the frequency of miscommunications and confrontations. Everyone's talking now, they're on speaking terms, and it isn't all easy. There are still disagreements, but they all agreed to keep Grandpa out of it. They agreed to divide and conquer on medical coordination and to stay in their lanes. And it won't surprise you, but it's worth reminding ourselves all along, their kids were watching it all. They were watching the fighting, and now they're watching the collaboration. They were seeing the adults in their family criticize one another and undermine one another, and now they are watching them figure it out together. When I think about the kids in that family, I also think about my kids and my kindergartner who advised me this very morning to tell you all how I feel. And this is how I feel. I feel very strongly that conversations create the future, and that whether or not we have them and how we have them is up to us. I believe this. What else has this much impact on our lives? How we approach these moments actually decides our futures. I was fortunate to meet the great Maya Angelou, and these words of hers are always with me. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. The 4 strategies we've talked about are the most effective way I've come up with to put people in a position to live out these great words. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everybody. Hello, hello. Okay, so let me ask you a few questions. But one thing that this insightful, gentle man, Adar, helped me with I wish it was earlier in the COVID pandemic. He and I actually spoke last week, and I'm not sure if others that are there had the same struggle, but I know many of us were confined with our families in quarantine. Some people were on Zoom calls and school and work. And for me, the struggle was I have two 19-year-olds and a 22-year-old. And at the time, during the summer, when things kind of started to open up, the struggle that I had were my kids wanted to get out and about, and I was really, really trying to stay adherent to the public health guidelines. And I had a tremendous conflict with my want and need to be with my kids and hug them and be with them, and however my desire for better health. And so there was a conflict for me, and I really didn't know how to navigate that very well, just that conversation. I'm not sure if others had that conflict, and maybe, Adar, you could share with us perhaps how you would have approached that.
Yeah, it's so hard, Jeannie. Before I start to tell you, oh, this, that, this, and that, the first thing you should hear is that this is really, really hard. And I've been working with families over the last year who've been grappling with this, and it's not easy. This is an example of there really not being a perfect solution. There not being a win-win. But we can try to move in a productive direction. And I can actually tell you a story of a family that I worked with where it was a mom and a daughter, and I advised the mom, who was experiencing her daughter's behavior as reckless and risky and upsetting. Meanwhile, of course, the daughter was saying, telling me, my mom just wants me to miss everything. She wants me to miss out on everything that all my other friends are allowed to do. But I supported the mom in asking the daughter a different kind of question to open the conversation, which was along the lines of what we've talked about today, asking a really good open-ended question that allows the person to feel heard and understood so that they can start to listen and help you feel understood. And what I advised the mom to ask the teenage daughter was, what are your biggest concerns and hopes in this time? And she was obviously hearing a lot of that in the sort of conflict back and forth, but somehow asking it in that way signaled to the daughter, oh, you want to hear about my concerns? Yeah, I've got concerns. Have a seat. And the mom listened and just gave all the energy she could to the listening, fortified by my assurances that this was going to take her somewhere productive. But after she listened all the way to her daughter, and the daughter spilled out all kinds of, developmentally appropriate concerns that a teenager would have during a pandemic, most of them having to do with social opportunity and the lack of it. But when she was done, the daughter looked very relieved and seemed to have really appreciated this moment. And I told the mom, be ready in that moment to ask her this: would you like to know about my biggest concerns and hopes? Opening the door, here's an invitation. And the daughter said, yes, I would. And it was a new kind of listening that she was able to do for her mom after having just been really seen and heard and validated. And of course, the mom did not have the objective of having her daughter miss out on everything that everybody else was doing. That had nothing to do with the mom's objective. And the daughter's objective had nothing to do with endangering grandma and grandpa and flouting COVID precautions. So they got away from listening in order to litigate, and they got toward listening in order to understand and connect. So that's what I've got, Jeannie. It's not perfect, and it doesn't make the conversation easy, but I think that what it does do is it starts to turn your effort and energy into something that moves in a productive direction, rather than effort and energy that is just additionally upsetting and creates new friction and spins that conflict cycle faster.
Gotcha. That's great. Okay, I have a few questions that my friend Gail texted me. So okay. She says, first of all, I love the 4 steps to help during a conversation. She has twins, a daughter and a son who are both 16. She says, my daughter, who's 16, and I continue to fall into a conflict cycle and are stuck. She's smart and quick-minded. I feel unmatched, like I can't keep up. She seems to love conflict and I do not. Do you recommend ground rules to help?
Sure, definitely. Sometimes the best thing to do is to have a conversation about what kind of conversation you want to have. If you're so far away from being able to have one that suits both parties or all parties, then the earliest stages of the work need to just be in setting a kind of foundational understanding about how we're going to talk. And then the same rules apply there. Where someone is sharing how they hope to talk, just listen all the way with them. Be there for the whole listening. Even if you have very different ideas about how you ought to talk, save that for later. Save that for once they've been heard and are in a position to hear you. Someone's got to go first. So that's what this is about. It's about, if you came to this webinar, you clearly have you have enough invested that you might be the one who should try and go first. And it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of resolve, but it can pay off.
Right. That's great.
Jeannie, I have, do you want me to take a look at, actually, there are plenty of questions here. I should maybe take a look at them. But first, if it's okay, I would really love to ask the group, if you wrote down a question at the beginning of our time together, this was not a question, one word. I asked you to write down a single word that best captured how you felt about having a long-avoided conversation. You wrote down that word. I'm wondering now if at the end of having looked at these 4 ideas, is there a new word that's coming up for you? And if so, write that one down now. And then, if you've got it in you, go ahead and drop in a chat the 2 words. The first one you wrote down, the word that represents how you feel when you think about having this long-avoided or really difficult conversation. And then the second word that you're writing down now. Maybe there's a little bit of distance between those 2 words. I think it can be really interesting to look at how things have shifted. So we have, let's see, one heal, and the second word is calm. We have one person who wrote down hope and then hope again, which is great to see. If you'd like, we have cautious at the beginning and now intentional. Another wrote down initially anxious and now curious. Love that movement. That's a wonderful thing to see. Then we have scared to cautiously optimistic, anxious to relief. This is the movement we're looking for. I'm so glad to hear some of you have experienced some traction, we can call it. I have a question here. Here's a question. What do you suggest for strategy number 1? I have been unsuccessful in planning a meeting with an estranged sister. Have tried several times. However, she regularly writes confrontational emails to me. I would like the cycle to change for relationship and family health. Of course you would. Thanks for the question, Sarah. I think, my goodness, if estrangement as a family phenomenon has really come onto my radar in the last year in a serious way, as in a way that in my all previous years as a mediator, I was not really working on estrangement, but I've been working on it a lot lately. And Sarah, I think that it can there are some resources that I would direct you to, and I'm happy to chat with you offline. But I think those confrontational emails, I'd encourage you not to take them to heart if possible, and to interpret them as the attempts of someone who still doesn't feel heard to feel heard, and who is using a technology and an approach that is just not going to get the job done. And that's really, it's just about getting you and your sister up. Did you say it was your sister? Yes. Getting you and your sister out of that pattern and into a new kind of, onto new ground. And one of the ways to do that is you can write a letter. It sounds like you have several times. If there are any ways in which you can validate some of what she's sending in her correspondences, I understand from your note that they're confrontational, so it's hard to do that when being confronted. But if there's a way to validate even something in there that might have meaning to her, you could start there. But additionally, it's sometimes very helpful to have a third party support that process and to talk with her a little bit, to talk with you a little bit, to set some groundwork and create a foundation, and then to structure a conversation for the two of you. You could be able to break through the cycle that you've been in with some support. Otherwise, be wary of emails, because as we know, tone and intent can really run amok when we try to talk about nuanced, difficult things without the benefits of vocal tone, facial expression, empathetic eyes, all that. Let's see.
I have another question here. Can I give you this one?
Of course, sure.
What is the single biggest mistake you've seen people make regarding conflict?
The single biggest mistake is trying to win. Because, and it's natural, it's human. As I said, we all know, we are all experts in conflict. Whether we call ourselves such or not, we're experts in conflict. We know it so well as human beings. It is a defining trait and experience and condition of being human, conflict. And the first impulse we have so much of the time, I have it too, is that I want to win this conflict. This is a conflict about justice or what's right or telling the truth. And so we want to win. We want the right side to triumph, because it feels like the universe's scales of justice are constantly adjusting under the weight of these conflicts, and we want it to come out on the right side. But when we try to win, we are showing up in a way that tells our counterpart or our counterparts or our family, that tells them that we don't care about them. And that's not true almost all of the time. But it looks like that if we're trying to win. It looks like we don't care, because we're not focused on doing all the listening like a tightrope walker. Listening to someone as though we were a tightrope walker in the middle of the biggest stunt of our lives. There's no time there to litigate. There's no room to spend energy checking our watch. If we check our watch, we will plummet. We shouldn't even think about the press conference once we do get to the other side. We need to have a singular focus on the listening. So I encourage people to imagine a tightrope walker, as long as that doesn't frighten you beyond being able to be functional. But it's that kind of focus. So Jeannie, I would say it's the impulse to try and win. And listen, oftentimes that is not only a selfish impulse. When we want to win an argument against our kid, my daughter's in kindergarten. Believe it or not, some of the times I'm right and she's wrong. I think she's remarkable, but sometimes she's wrong. But if I start and if I lead with correcting her or litigating the issue, the tone, the feeling she gets is one of me, even if it's in her best interest. I mean, oftentimes these arguments, for when it's a parent and a kid, it is about the kid's best interest that you're arguing. But it won't look or sound or feel like that to them if you appear to be trying to win the argument or the conflict.
Yeah, that's great. Very insightful.
Well, let's see. We've got a question from Carrie. Shall I read it, Jeannie?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. Go for it. Thanks.
Sure. Carrie writes, we have team members at work who struggle to have conversations with one another when there is conflict or disagreement. As a leader, I often act as a mediator. Yeah, you do. Do you have any advice to encourage team members to have these conversations, and any other advice aside from what you already covered for leaders? Your framework is very common sense and helpful. So thanks, Carrie. Do you have any advice to encourage team members to have these conversations? Yeah, because here's the problem, Carrie. It's not just your problem. It's the problem. It becomes a cultural problem when every time there's disagreement, we just send it up the chain. to, as high up the chain as it feels important to the people in the dispute, which means it's going up to HR or to the C-suite. And that's not good for a number of reasons. It's not productive, it's not efficient, but it's not good. There are even better reasons for that not being the way to do it. It's not good for culture. It's not good for innovation. Because here's the thing, and you will probably attest to this, Carrie, disagreement and divergent points of view, and even direct conflict, these are moments in an effort for a family, for a Fortune 50 company, for a political campaign. Those are moments when you are on the verge of breaking through into some new powerful idea. Conflict is loaded with opportunity. And when we only treat it as negative, and when we only throw it up the chain to be resolved, what we're doing is we're just sort of mortgaging away all of the valuable input that conflict can bring. Conflict drives in innovation, and when we have the difficult conversation, face it, don't run from it, don't send it to HR, but let's have this conversation and let's have it well in a way that allows us to extract the value. And let's see, we're disagreeing about this so strongly. We must feel powerfully and passionately about this. There's really important stuff here that we need to tend to together. And oftentimes, when we start to impose human resources policies or company policies on these conversations, they become transactional rather than imaginative. They become, they become a walk through a handbook, a series of procedural steps, rather than an opportunity to become the best group that's working on whatever the group is working on. So wherever I'm working with companies and trying to help them do this right now, Carrie. So your question is very timely. Just this morning, I was emailing with a head of HR who's experiencing this very challenge, and we're designing interventions that basically build just a few skills, just like we worked today with 4 skills. You can similarly take 4 or 5 skills that help people involved in an effort to have these hard conversations in ways that take them from, okay, it was uncomfortable, difficult conflict. We had this conversation, and now we're here because of how we had that conversation. That's what I love to see. But Carrie, if you and I can talk offline as well, I'm happy to continue this conversation. I hope those remarks were just somewhat useful to you.
Today we've put Adar's beliefs into practice because we are managing the conflict of technology today, doing my best to stay calm and think creatively and lean into the challenge. So, So in what ways have the challenges of COVID changed your thinking about conflict approaches?
They have. That's a great question. How has COVID changed or reinforced my thinking about approaches to conflict? And I would say that, particularly along this dimension of asking questions and listening, it has reinforced them, reinforced those ideas. And also, I think one of the really notable things that COVID has done in my work is to actually allow. COVID is just a really obvious force that is only somewhat within our control. And that has actually in itself been a powerful teaching tool in my mediation work with businesses and families, to be able to demonstrate to people, do you see how unwieldy and devastating some outside force can be to people who are engaged in an effort or people who are trying to take care of others? We should not underestimate how destructive external forces can be. And therefore, it is that much more important for us to be able to communicate effectively, because there might come a time when we don't have the benefit of taking as long as we want to finally start listening to each other. We might have to get our house in order more quickly than we would have liked. So, for example, I worked with the executive of an addiction treatment center in New York City that was overrun by COVID. And I mean, there, it's like, where can you find a more powerful example of circumstances beyond our control wreaking havoc? Deep conflict in the executive team about how to deal with certain issues, and it was time to either start to listen and make decisions together, or really the alternative was devastating and actually lethal. So I think COVID has raised the stakes in some ways, in being able to talk about what actually can come if we don't tend to this and we don't bite the bullet and start listening past our discomfort. What is a gracious way of closing a conversation that is derailed without angering the counterpart further? That's a great question. Here, if it's derailed, what I love in the implicit in the question is the assumption that we should discontinue it and we should close it if it's been derailed. So first, to recognize that, yes, that's the right decision. How to close it graciously? I mean, closing it quickly is most important. We can get to gracious if we get to the table again next time. But one of the ways to do it is to just say, it seems to me this isn't going in a direction that's great for either of us or for any of us. I'd like a chance to give this some thought so that I can be showing up in the most productive way possible. So for that reason alone, I'd like to ask that we pause here. And you can take the ownership of it, even if it wasn't your fault, the derailment. But again, discontinuing a derailed process as soon as possible is important, because we want to prevent any further harm. We don't want to do damage in any of our attempts to do any of this. There's a question from Laura. Any suggestions how to diffuse conflict when you can't schedule a conversation? For example, with a teenager at home for the last year, quarantined, emotions run high. And in the heat of the moment, a teenager doesn't want to wait for a scheduled, thoughtful conversation. But I need help lowering the immediate temperature with day-to-day conflict. Thanks. Laura, I don't have teenage children. I was a teenager once. But my heart is going out to you because I have worked with a number of families in the past year who were trying to lower the temperature with teenagers in their home. Teenagers who were supposed to be at home when COVID hit and were finishing high school, and also teenagers and early 20-year-olds who crash landed back at home during COVID and did not intend to be living with their parents and doing school online. This is very hard. I think that right, teenagers don't always want to schedule the conversation. They don't want to set a time in advance, and sometimes we are experiencing their emotions in a wave, and we need to find a way to survive those moments, and that's really difficult. I think first of all you have to take care of yourself. So if it really isn't appropriate for you to have the conversation in the state that your kid is in, finding a way to say, I can tell there's really important stuff that you're trying to tell me, and I really want to understand, but I can't right now, so I need to step away. And that's if it's too much and you do need to step away. But if you want to try to lower the temperature there, again, this comes back to, is there a way that without one, I had one parent in a couple telling the other, like, what Adar's I was there, I was on the line, so he wasn't speaking about me behind my back, but he's like, you want us to sell out. You want us to sell out as parents and validate things that they're saying that are asinine, that are ridiculous. And he was only partly joking, and to which I had to respond, yes, in a sense I am, because of its utility. Because in the end, later on down the road, your teenager is not going to look back years from now and say, I remember when my dad told me that he listened to me when I was really actually full of it. And I'll always remember that. No, probably not. Probably if this happens, the kid is going to look back and say, wow, my dad really found a way to understand what I was experiencing in spite of how I was behaving. And so finding a way to validate something about what they're saying can bring the temperature down immediately and sometimes significantly. And then say, I really want to understand. Is there a way that we can talk right now or really soon that you could help me even understand more and understand better what you're experiencing. Because right now, this is really, the temperature's really high. That's one thing that I can offer, Laura. And then additionally, it's just to say, I get it. This is hard, and I can see it's very, very hard for you. Let's talk about it when we're in a shape to do so. Laura, also, like, if it's helpful, I would be more than happy to spend 15 minutes on the phone. We could see each other, and I'd be happy to walk through some of the other things that worked for the families I've worked for. It's hard to answer without any feedback from you, without seeing your face, but I hope something in there was worth the 2 minutes.
That's a good answer. That was great.
There's some comments that, thank you so much. It armed me with helpful and supportive info. Really glad to hear it. Let's see, in my home, we have, with 2 teenagers, we have made a ground rule for when we get flustered. Most times it works. The person who is upset has to speak in a cartoon character's voice. I love it, Sarah. There's actually a former Soul Salon speaker, a veteran speaker, David Baum, who I think also believes in speaking in a cartoon character's voice in tough moments. So how does one make the transition so that the counterpart now asks predefined questions? From Mark. Mark, that's a great question. Yeah, this doesn't work. It can work for the first time or two, Mark, for me to ask you, Mark, go to your counterpart with a list of wonderful, thoughtfully worded questions for them and give them that gift. And that can work initially, but ultimately it's going to be most powerful if there's some reciprocity and some balance there. And to do that, there's actually a step-by-step guide that I published that I think also appears in the resources on Jeannie's landing page for this Salon event. It's called How to Have a Difficult Conversation, and it gives a step-by-step guide, which includes sending something to your counterpart and inviting them to join you in your process of preparation before the engagement, which I think can be very powerful and effective. So Mark, the short answer to your question is, see if you can get them to predefine some questions and to do some preparation alongside yours. To revisit or not to revisit, I was involved in a conflict 5 years ago that involved my being bullied and then dragged through an employment court case. I won the case and could walk away with my head held high. However, I have been haunted by the conflict ever since. Would you advise trying to reach out to the perpetrator, in quotes, to try to resolve it on an emotional level now that the time has passed? I guess what I'm asking is, do you have any advice about being at peace with formally resolved but emotionally unresolved conflict? This comes from anonymous attendee. To the anonymous attendee who wrote this, I'm so sorry for your trouble. And my advice is that you have to do what suits you in this moment. There isn't a way that I can adequately anticipate or understand all of your conditions around this. So it has to be your call. It has to be what's going to feel right to you. But if you are to reach out, I would encourage in this case, given the sensitivity, given the precedent of a legal action, that this be a supported process, a process that is supported by a third party. I would strongly encourage that a mediator, a formal certified mediator who's trained in that, because what you're talking about is moving into the area of reconciliation, and this has already been, decided legally, and now you're looking at emotional healing, a kind of emotional closure. By the way, this person might also be hoping for that, but there's a huge spectrum along which they might be willing to admit how much they're hoping for that, and there's another spectrum of sort of how they'll act and behave and speak when approached around this. So having a professional third party is really helpful. So much of the work that I did in the early part of my career as an international conflict resolution practitioner, including all the way back in my work in Belfast, Northern Ireland, trying to help communities after the peace agreement was signed to find ways toward reconciliation. that work is painstaking and important work, and it has the potential to backfire and to create new disturbance. So it's important that as we try to do reconciliation work and go back and try to resolve things that still feel unresolved, we need to do it really thoughtfully and cautiously, so we're not reopening conflict that has been decided. So we're not undoing closure that is actually good for you and for the other parties. If it is, then we don't want to undo it. We just want to do the healing. We just want to do the resolving. Having somebody who can advise on how to approach that process is important. So there we have it.
Okay.
Jeannie, I thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Sorry for our tech glitch.
Thank you for, I'll just read this last comment as a way of closing. This says, you both stayed calm under pressure and resolved, worked around the technical glitches in a good way. Well done, double exclamation point. This has been very informative. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Bye, Jeannie. Bye, everyone. Thank you for having me.